Be live. Good afternoon, everybody. Kimmy McBurney with She Sparks Society. I have Mary Hart with us today. I'm so excited to get to speak with you. So, kind of like a hybrid introduction. My favorite question to ask people is birth to like current. I say birth to real estate, but you're not actually like a real estate professional. So birth to now in 5 minutes or less.
Sure. Well, actually, I am a real estate professional because I am also a licensed real estate agent, which you probably don't know that about me, and a real estate investor. Birth 60 years ago in July. I just turned 60 and grew up in North Carolina, went to college there, moved to Alaska, gutted fish in Bristol Bay for a summer, became the fastest gutter on the boat. I could do 12 salmon a minute. It's my claim to fame. Went to law school, practiced law in Juneau, Alaska for a number of years, and then moved back to North Carolina, opened my own firm in Asheville. After 30 years of practice, I retired from lawyering, and now I consult around the country and even internationally. And I have a mentorship and education program for real estate investors and wannabe real estate investors, and I consult, and that's about it right now. 3 kids, 3 grown kids, 3 grown stepkids. Split my time between Asheville, North Carolina, and upstate New York on Lake Champlain, which is where I am today.
Wow. Okay, you did that in like 90 seconds flat. I'm really impressed. I have so many questions, and I'm going to try not to go too much on a personal tangent. What brought you to Alaska?
Just wanderlust mostly. I decided I wanted to go. I was a junior in college in Davidson, North Carolina. I went to Davidson College, and I had met a guy who was just a friend who had been there and worked in a cannery, and I thought that sounded like fun, so I wanted to go. And then I ended up meeting the guy who's now my ex-husband, who was my first husband and the father of my children. And he had been going up there for a few years, which I did not realize when I first met him. And anyway, long story short, 5 weeks into our relationship, he was graduating from college and moving up to Alaska, and I went with him and gutted fish for a summer on a floating barge in Bristol Bay, and then gutted salmon 16 hours a day, and then came back to school and finished up school and moved up to Alaska and got married, lived there for, gosh, I don't know, 13, 14 years. Let's see, no longer than that, 20 years, about 20 years. Yep, all my kids were born there, and then moved back to North Carolina in 2003, so that was 20 years ago, when I wanted to bring the kids home to visit grandparents and all that, and moved to Asheville, opened my law firm there right after I got divorced, sadly. So anyway, but it's all good. I'm married to a wonderful man now, and still love Asheville, still love New York. I have a farm in Kentucky, so we kind of travel all around.
That sounds awesome. Cool. So then my next question, when you practiced law for a long time, what kind of type of law did you practice?
So I started out as an estate planning attorney. I graduated in 1991 from law school. And so I did that for many, many years. And then as you're working with high net worth individuals, as you can imagine, more than estate planning needs crop up. They have real estate needs and business needs and elder law needs and tax needs. And so I expanded my knowledge base in those areas. And when I moved to Asheville and opened my own firm, we concentrated on estate planning, real estate, business, and a little bit of tax work. So that's what we did. And I owned the firm, but I had about 10 employees. And then I shut that down in 2017 when I got tired of babysitting employees, really. And then I did my own thing for a couple of years, and then retired in 2019 just to be a consultant and do my own investing and teach around the country. So that's what I do now.
I love that. And so when did you get your real estate license and all that?
2013, I got my real estate license, and I never did it to be a commercial, to be a real estate broker for myself as a business. I mean, for others. I did it for myself. I did a few closings as a real estate agent just to see what it was like. And I decided it was more of a pain in the rear end than even it was as the real estate lawyer. And I had a full-time job running a law firm, and I had vacation rental business and other investments. And I was like, no, I'm just going to do this for myself. So I just keep it now. I get referral fees when my stepdaughter is a real estate agent in Nashville. So if she sells a property for me, I get a referral fee, or that's about it.
Okay. So, and may I ask her name? Or maybe
sure.
I'll ask her.
Taryn Hart. She's with Allen Tate Beverly Hanks.
Nice. Okay, cool. And so do you hang your license? Are you just an independent yourself, or do you?
I'm just independent. I'm just independent.
A person like you, I was gonna guess you're just independent.
Yeah. No, if I were out there trying to be a real estate agent as a career, of course, I would hang my license with somebody else. I don't want to be a BIC or anything like that, but broker in charge. But
Yeah.
Now I'm just doing it just to keep my license active because, I never know what I might want to do in the future. I'm very ADD. So it's like, oh, that'll be fun. Let's go do more real estate, So I keep it active, but
I love it. Well,
I
maybe
don't
I'll
do
see you
anything.
in continuing ed one of these days.
Yeah, probably.
Cool. So, and then you said, so you invest for yourself, like what kind of portfolio do you have? And like, how'd you get into the investor part of it?
So I actually got into be an investor when I moved from Alaska to Asheville. I wasn't sure that I didn't want to go back to Alaska. So my then husband and I rented out our home up there, and it was like $1,800 a month, which seemed like a fortune to me. And then when I got to Asheville, I started just looking around and doing other things. I ended up buying my building that I ran my law office out of in downtown Asheville, just sold that in November. So I owned that for, 17 years, 16, 17 years. I got asked to be a private lender, so I started doing that. I started getting into vacation rentals in 2006 before anybody was doing it really. So I had a number of vacation rentals in Asheville, and I still have 2 there, but I did that. I have some retail spaces, farmland, some more vacation rentals in Kentucky and in Virginia. I've got about 12 with some partners in Virginia. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of different things. Now I'm working on self-storage. 2 other partners and I were under contract to develop a self-storage facility in New Jersey, but the market has been going down in the rental rate. So we just pulled the plug on that and are looking for better opportunities in the Carolinas or Virginia. So that's my next play. Hopefully we'll see how that goes.
Such a diverse portfolio.
I like to do, and I do a lot of private lending too. So I like to be diverse, it fits my personality, so it works for me.
Yeah. What do the kids say? Hashtag goals is what
Yeah.
that is.
That's right. Speaking of which, I just had a conversation. My oldest son, who's 31, is here visiting me. And I've never sat down and talked to him about the finances or, his money or my money, because I've been managing my kids' money since they inherited some many, many years ago. Anyway, that was an interesting conversation, talking about estate planning and finances and when he has to take over. And it's a big conversation when you get into it with your kids,
Right. I mean, it's crazy. Like I think back to how my parents raised me. My dad was really proactive with our money and stuff, but he unfortunately recently passed.
I'm sorry.
And yeah, thank you. And it's like, you can be as proactive as you want to be. Like, I still feel like there's conversations that could have been had, when you spoke at ABL meetup, the Net Profit Summit, it just so resounded with me. And I'm like, we can't talk about it enough. So
yeah, I mean,
that.
really,
and so
we could talk about this for days and never touch every subject. Days. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally. And then, so now you say you do kind of like a little bit of consulting, speaking, and then what is your makeup of your current clientele? Like, do you see yourself gearing more towards real estate investors, or are you kind of just across the spectrum?
So in terms of consulting, I ended up being in front of real estate investors or professionals or small business owners the most, just because I get asked to speak at a lot of conferences around the country that cater to that audience, mostly real estate investors. So they're the people who hear about me more. I don't have a big advertising campaign or anything. So I end up consulting a lot with real estate professionals, real estate investors, small business owners, and professionals about everything from estate planning, asset protection planning, self-directed IRA investing, and then a myriad of investing topics. And so I realized I could only reach so many people doing that, and only reach so many people, frankly, as a lawyer. So last year, I set up an education and mentorship platform called the AIM Hire Academy. It's actually the alternatíveinvestingmovement.com and the AIM Hire Academy. And so it's just a monthly subscription service where we have twice a month Zoom calls where I teach, and we have guest speakers, and we do Q&A and all that kind of stuff. So that's to try to reach a wider audience who might need my help, but doesn't either have the money to pay me for, an actual consultation, because that's $500 an hour, or they just want more education than one-on-one stuff. So that's what I'm doing. A lot of my time is spent doing that.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. Well, so my original intent, even though now I have a subcategory that I've taken off your list of services, estate planning.
Yeah.
So I feel like right now our current demographic is a little bit I don't say younger. I like to think of myself as young. I'm
You look young.
37.
You look
Thank
young.
you. I was 37 in July, so also a July baby. But you know what I mean? Like earlier, in adulthood, we have young kids. I have a 2 and a 5-year-old. So people who are kind of like, middle of the road, 30s, early 40s, where do we even start?
Well, so first of all, you may be young at 37, and I would consider that young given that I'm 60. But in my opinion, everybody 18 and over should have an estate plan. So you're not young in that sense. And really, when people think of estate planning, they think of it as this boring, tedious, expensive, dry process. I think of it as your ultimate love letter. It's literally the nicest gift you can give your loved ones and your family is to get your financial house in order in a way that if something were to happen to you, whether you become disabled or deceased, that your family, your loved ones can just go about the business of grieving you and have everything laid out where they know where everything is, they know what you have, they know how to administer your estate in the easiest, least costly, most effective way possible. To me, that's the ultimate love letter. So if you think about it, if you love your spouse, you love your kids, do you want them to have to go, oh my God, I don't even know how to pay the bills. Are they on auto pay? Is it a credit? Where does everything go? Who inherits? Where does it inherit? Do I have to, go to probate? Do I have to know what the law is? There's just so many things. And I think if we all took the time to put a notebook together, and in fact, I'm drafting one right now that will be available to the public for sale, hopefully later this year, that's called Your Ultimate Love Letter Workbook, where you can put all that information together. Because just like in this conversation with my child, who's 31, he's almost as old as you are, I'm trying to have these conversations with him. And I'm like, this is such a big conversation. I just need to be able to hand you a notebook and say, here's all the information you need, everything. So anyway, I think estate planning is your ultimate love letter. And once someone is 18, no one can make a decision for them if they become unable to make a decision themselves, whether that's temporarily because they're just had surgery and they're unconscious for a while, or whether they're disabled for the rest of their life, or whether they're dead. Once you're 18, nobody has that power to make a decision for you or deal with your assets or your bills or anything, unless they go to court and are appointed as your guardian, which is a time-consuming, costly, tedious, emotional process, unless you've given them the power to do that through your estate planning documents, powers of attorney, things like that. And so, if you own, let's say you own a piece of property in your name, Kimmy, and something happens to you, and that property is in the middle of a sales process. You're selling it because you're under contract to buy another one, and you're hit by a bus, and you have, for 2 months, you're unconscious, and it's just in your name. Nobody has the power to sign that, or nobody has the power to sign for you. Even if you own it with your spouse, it still takes your signature, particularly in North Carolina. And so if you don't have any documents in place, think of the amazing stress that would cause on the sale would not close. If your spouse is on that deed, he'd be stressed out. It's beyond stressful to think about. But if all you did was give a very simple power of attorney that said, if I'm unable to make my own decisions, my husband or my friend or my sister, whoever it is, has the power to sign those documents for you, that closing could go through, the money could get deposited in your bank account, your bills could get paid, your children could be taken care of, all these things that won't necessarily happen if you become disabled without documents in place. Does that make sense?
100%. So I feel like one of the things that's overwhelming to me about estate planning, you kind of touched on it. It's so ebb and flow. Like I actually just sold my house today and bought another house. And so like you said, that's another utility company and the cable company and the bills and the credit, I have multiple credit cards and multiple bank accounts. Like it's always changing. So I think you kind of spoke to it. Like, are there nuts and bolts, like key documents that you can put in place that are kind of overarching, like a power of attorney? Yeah. Your will, like, can your will just be overarching? Like, I don't know which company is I'm going to own at what point in time, yes. But like, okay. So yeah.
So when we draft a will or a trust, unless you want to leave a specific asset, a specific piece of property, for instance, to a specific person, we don't list the assets in the will. So for instance, your will might say, let's say you're married and you have 2 young children, your will might say, what's your husband's name?
Chuck.
Chuck. I leave all of my assets to Chuck if he survives me. If Chuck does not survive me, I leave my assets in equal shares to my children. And if they're under the age of 30, pick an age, it goes in trust for them. And we say, well, how those trusts operate. We don't specify what assets you have at the time because your will is what we call ambulatory. It walks around and follows you during lifetime and gathers up anything that's in your separate name to go through your will when you die, regardless of whether that's 1 year, 10 years, 30 years. If you have a trust document that you're using as your estate planning document, it governs anything you have titled in the name of that trust, but we still use broad language. Like we'll say the trust assets shall be distributed as follows. And maybe when you set up that trust, you had one bank account and one car, but 20 years later, you've put in 5 LLCs and 3 vehicles and 4 Merrill Lynch accounts and whatever it is. You see what I mean? And that trust has just, every time you've opened a new account or bought a new asset, you've titled it in the name of the trust, not you individually. So now that bucket, that trust owns all those assets.
No, uh-oh.
You want to leave a specific, you see what I mean? So yes, we're freezing up a little bit, but so it walks around and follows you, and we don't have to be specific, and we write provisions in it to keep it flexible as life changes.
Okay, and how would one differentiate between I need a will or I need a trust, or what are the pros and cons of both?
Sure, there's no just one quick answer. Generally speaking, when we use a trust, like let's call it a revocable living trust, a living trust for short, that we use that a lot in estate planning. We're usually doing that to avoid probate and to keep the administration of your estate private. When we go through probate, we only go through probate when we die with something titled in our separate name, because that's what goes through our will. So if your piece of property was in the name of Kimmy McBurney and nobody else, it would go through probate, which means it would go through your will if you had one, or it would go through the laws of intestacy, which is essentially your state legislature saying who gets it if you don't have a will and how they get it, right? They're trying to figure out who would be logical objects of your bounty, you know, the people that you love, your spouse, your kids, your parents, that kind of thing. So if something is in your separate name and you die owning it, it will need to go through probate. And again, either pass according to the terms of your will or the will the legislature has created for you if you have not created your own. That probate process can be tedious and costly, just a headache. It can be a real headache. If we want to avoid all that, then instead of you owning those assets in your separate name, we would title them in the name of a trust. And then it's just a private trust administration. It might only take an hour to administer it, you know, change the deeds. It really doesn't take much time. If you own something, say joint with your husband, and in North Carolina, you probably would own that real property as tenants by the entirety. You guys are real estate agents, you know what that is. Meaning that we'll pick on him since he's not on the call and he's a guy, he dies first. You would own that house by operation of law the moment he took his last breath, because you're married and North Carolina has a form of ownership between married people for real property that says tenants by the entirety. You would own it automatically, no probate. But now what happens when you die? It's still in your separate name. So you'd go through probate, or your estate would go through probate on your death. If, however, when you and your husband bought that property, you titled it in the name of your revocable living trust, and you can have a joint trust between the two of you, then it never goes through probate on either death. It just follows the terms of the trust document. A private administration can be done very quickly. It's not a public record. We don't pay any fees to the court. We don't have to, sometimes you have to hire a lawyer, but depends on how complicated the trust is. But it's much simpler to administer. So it costs more to set up, and it takes a little bit more time to set it up and get the assets in there, but it's a lot simpler on the death of the person who set up the trust than probate usually is. So when we look at it, we look at everybody's situation to say, does your situation warrant the expense and tediousness of setting up a trust to avoid probate? Or is your situation, because you're just starting out, very simple? You know, you just have a bank account and you can put somebody's name on it as a pay on death beneficiary. So we just have to look at it and decide, you know, weigh it out. What makes the most sense for your situation? In a perfect world, I think everybody would avoid probate because it's no fun to go through. But not everybody has, say, the $4,000 it might cost to set up a revocable trust type estate plan.
Yeah, understood. And then quick, just one technical question on the trust. Like you mentioned that certain assets you title and et cetera. How are those updated on an ongoing basis? I guess with whatever attorney set up the trust can amend
So
that
when you say update, do you mean update the terms of the trust or update the assets?
assets.
Okay, so once an asset's in the trust, you don't need to update it. So for instance, if you bought a house, instead of the deed reading your name or you and your husband, it would read you and your husband as trustees of the McBurney Family Trust or whatever you called it. Once it's in there, you don't have to ever change the deed again as long as you own that house. You may want to change what happens to that house when you die, but that's just changing the terms of the trust document itself. You never have to change the deed. If you start out with a bank account and you put the bank account in the name of the trust, again, balances can fluctuate, but it's owned by the trust. So if you want to change who inherits that bank account, you just change your trust document. It's private, doesn't have to be notarized. It's wise to notarize it, but doesn't have to be. It's just a contract, so.
Yeah, but meaning more so like as you're adding, like say we all become, real estate tycoons and, over the years you're acquiring properties, like you
Yeah.
said, cars, vehicles, other assets, like you're just
So
constantly.
you just title it when you buy it, you title it in the name of the trust. So if you think about the trust like a third party, let's pretend I am a trust. I'm a box, I'm a trust. And my name is Kimmy McBurney, is trustee of the McBurney Family Trust. You go out there and you want to buy a new car at DMV, you put it in the name of Kimmy McBurney as trustee of the McBurney Family Trust. You open a new bank account, you title it in the name of the trust, not in your individual name. You buy a new property, the deed now reads Kimmy McBurney is trustee of the McBurney Family Trust or whatever you name your trust. You see what I mean? So it's just, you think of that trust like a third party, but you manage it, control it, can revoke it, can amend it, can do anything you want to with it. You can put assets in, you can take them out, and that's just changing the title, just like you would transfer to a third party. If you were selling me a piece of property, you'd deed it to Mary Hart. If you're transferring a piece of property to your trust or buying it in the name of your trust, the buyer on the deed just reads your trust, not you individually, you as trustee of your trust.
Mhm.
That
I
makes
wonder,
sense?
do you know how that works with like lending? I mean.
Yeah.
Lenders will lend and you can close in the name of a trust.
So generally speaking, with this type of trust, they will lend in the name of the trust. Even if they don't, if you, let's say you got a loan on a piece of property and it's in your name and you want to transfer it to your revocable living trust for estate planning purposes. And I say that because there are different types of trusts for different purposes. If you transferred, let's say you had a loan on that house and you deeded that house to your revocable living trust, the bank cannot call that loan due. There's something called the Garn-St. Germain Act that says, the bank has a due on sale transfer clause. They can call the loan due, but there are exceptions when they cannot call the loan due. One of those is if you're transferring it to a trust of which it's revocable, you remain the beneficiary, blah, blah, blah. So that's what we do. We just, if you buy it in your name, but it has a loan on it, we can still transfer it over. You still are, obligated on the loan, but the way the title passes at death will now pass through the trust rather than through probate. We're changing the legal owner to your trust, but the note is still you.
Gotcha. Cool. So it sounds like bare minimum, we want a will or a trust. That's sort of all encompassing. I mean, so can the will be as generic as like you said, everything I own of value goes to my husband and then to my kids split evenly?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I love that. Cause so like at minimum, like you said, as long as
Yeah.
you're over 18, give it to my mom, give it to my
Yep.
sister. I don't care.
Yep.
And then you mentioned power of attorney.
Mhm.
And that, like I said, that speaks so true to me. So my dad actually passed of Alzheimer's. So we had power of attorney long before he passed. But it's like, so is that another all-encompassing document that you can just say, hey, I'm Kimmy, and if I'm ever incapacitated, like you need to talk to my husband?
Yes. So let me go back for a minute and say what I think the bare minimum package should be for everybody 18 and over. At a minimum, you should have a will, a healthcare power of attorney, naming the person who makes your healthcare decisions, what we call a durable power of attorney, which is for all decisions other than healthcare, a living will, which is what we crudely call the pull the plug document. If you are never going to regain consciousness and you're just being kept alive on artificial life support, and if you would not want that to happen, then that living will is the document that allows your healthcare agent to ask the hospital to terminate life support. And probably a HIPAA waiver, which we can get into later. That's the bare minimum, in my opinion, for everybody over 18, because most 18-year-olds are going to have a bank account or a car or something. even if it's not worth much and they're going to go through probate, at least they can waive the bond requirement. So their executor, what we call the personal representative, does not have to post a bond at the court out of their own pocket to administer the estate. If nothing else, that's what you can do. Or if you don't have much assets, but you have children, many assets, but you have children, that will can nominate the guardian if both the parents are deceased, for instance, right? There are lots of reasons. Who takes care of your pets, even if you don't have kids? You can nominate your pet guardian. Many, many reasons to do that. If you, by the way, choose to go the route of a revocable living trust, you should always still have a will. It's just a different kind of will. We call it a pour-over will, and it sits there as a safety net to catch any assets that you forget to put in the trust. Okay. So remember, I've told you to make this trust work, you've got to title your assets in it, because the trust can only govern the things it owns. So you got to title the assets in it. Well, inevitably, we all, including me, will forget to put something in the trust. So this pour over will says, hey, if anything that goes through probate goes through my will, put it in my trust, pour it over into my trust to be distributed according to the terms of the trust. So the trust is the beneficiary of the will. So we always, if you have a trust, you still need a will. A lot of people think you don't need one, but you need that safety net will.
Yeah,
So,
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah. So most packages, once you start getting a little bit beyond one car in a bank account, probably could benefit from having a revocable living trust, a will, a healthcare power of attorney, a durable power of attorney, a living will, and probably a HIPAA waiver.
I love that.
That's kind of the minimum.
Okay, cool. I love that. So I'm kind of going to wrap a bow on that because I kind of want to leave it at that. Like, hey, bare minimum, let's at least get our ducks in a row and do these things. So I love when you mentioned self-directed IRA. I feel like that's pretty popular, or just investing, portfolio investing in general. You know,
Sure.
you mentioned talking to your kids. How do you kind of guide them, or what's your advice for people around our age? Like, hey, let's start talking about, especially 1099 independent contractors. Like most of us don't have 401ks, you know, stuff like that. Like, where do we start, or what do you recommend and kind of
Sure.
advise people on?
Yeah, so my kids are 31, 28, and 23. And the 31-year-old and the 28-year-old have lived more out of the country than in the country since they graduated from college. They've lived in Ecuador, Turkey, Egypt, Morocco, Cambodia, Mongolia. They live all over the place. So I've been handling their investments, and my youngest son was too young to deal with it. So I've been handling their stuff because they just haven't been here and able to do it. Now that's changing. They're all kind of moving back to the States and getting more settled. So in terms of teaching them, I like to think of the life cycle of wealth. And I want to tell people, anybody who's starting out, there is a life cycle of wealth. When we all start out, we have to make some money first, right? When your parents stop supporting you, you got to go make the money, unless you win the lottery. Somehow you got to make the money. Once you make it, hopefully you have chosen to live beneath your means so you can start saving it. Once you start saving it, you can start growing it. Now, there's a little hybrid in there that as a real estate investor, if you choose to be a real estate investor, you can often use other people's money to grow your portfolio. So that's a little hybrid. And we'll get into that later if you want to. But basically, you make the money, you grow the money by investing it, making your dollars work for you. And you want to do that in a way that you're learning, you're educating yourself on how to do it in the most tax advantaged way, and the way that is the most protected from creditors. So you don't lose it in the lawsuit and you don't lose it to taxes. And I want to give a little example of why taxes are so important. And this goes to your self-directed IRA, 401k. I don't know if you've heard of the magic penny example. You might have. So this is a really powerful example. Let's say that I gave you a magic penny that's going to double in value every day for 30 days. And you put that in your Roth IRA account, meaning you pay taxes on that 1 cent, whatever, you put it in your Roth IRA account. Let's say it's still a penny. Well, a Roth IRA is never subject to income taxes once you put the money in there, because you've paid the tax on the money before you put it in. But let's, in my magic penny, say it's still worth 1 cent. If it doubles every day for 30 days, tax-free, do you have any idea what that 1 penny is worth in 30 days?
I do feel like I've heard this. It's like some astronomical amount.
It's over $5 million
Yeah,
in 30 days.
Yeah.
Okay? If it were 31 days, it would now be over 10 million, because that 5 million plus would double to over 10 million plus. Now, let's say you took that same penny and you kept it in your separate name and you were in a 28% tax bracket. And every time it doubled, you paid 28% taxes on the income. At the end of 30 days, rather than having over $5 million, you'd have $68,000. That's it. That shows you the incredibly powerful force of compounding and the destructive force of taxation. So what I tell my kids is when you get out there in the working world, first of all, budget, which they haven't done yet very well, but they're getting there. Budget, live beneath your means, right? Live beneath your means. Set up first an emergency savings fund of 6 months to a year of your expenses and just set it aside in an interest-bearing account. Don't touch it. That's your emergency. You lose your job, you get sick, your car breaks down, you've got some emergency money, 6 months to a year. Once you've done that and you're paying all your monthly bills and being able to save some, then start contributing to a Roth IRA. You can contribute, I think this year it's $6,500 if you're under the age of 50 every year. Start contributing to a Roth IRA. If you want to learn how to invest it yourself and do like real estate investing, you can put it in a self-directed account. Now, if you have a 401k, by the way, and as independent contractors, if you have no employees, you can set up a solo 401k that you manage yourself, and you can get a lot more money in there every year. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's like 50-some thousand or something like that. It's a lot of money. I haven't looked at it in a couple of years what the numbers are, but anyway, so solo 401k can be very powerful. And if you put that in a Roth IRA, so you pay taxes on it before you contribute it, but then you can grow it without it ever being subject to income taxes again. You take that money and you start either lending it out or doing little deals, and you grow it and grow it and grow it. And now when you're 59 and a half or older, you can't take it out to your 59 and a half. Then you can start pulling it out to live on completely free of income taxes. And if you don't need it, you can leave it to your heirs free of income taxes. So that would be what I would say. So, set up a reserve account, make sure you pay all your bills, save enough, set up a reserve account, set up your Roth IRA, then start investing in a way that is safe from creditors. So you've structured your entities or your trust properly, and in a way that is as tax efficient as possible. So the Roth IRA or 401k. And then the last piece in the life cycle is, how do you pass that on? How do you create your legacy, whether that's money or otherwise? But that's when the estate plan comes in. And remember, people think they're going to live forever, but people die in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, people die young. You don't know. So in a perfect world, we'd all have everything ready to go. So that ultimate love letter would be there ready for people if something, God forbid, happened to us. Like my husband doesn't take care of any of the bills or the finances. That's all me. Like, I don't know how to run all the lawnmowers. He doesn't know how to pay all the bills, right? I mean, we have very distinct, very backwards kind of roles in a way, but so what I'm having to do now, and this is the genesis of this ultimate love letter workbook that I'm working on, I need to write down, I've got tons of properties, tons of LLCs, land trusts, personal property trusts, IRAs, multiple IRAs. Oh my gosh, you would have no idea. So I'm not only putting my documents in place, but I've got to put the spreadsheets in place that show what are all the bills for each property, what's on auto pay, what account does that come out of, when do you have to write a check for like property taxes or insurance or whatever. So that financial piece of letting them know what's out there is part of it, and who pays it, and what do you need to know? My passport number, my social security, my driver's license. Where do they find all this information if something happens to me? And then here are the documents that they will use to administer my estate. They got to have all the information, and then they have to know how to administer it. That whole ball of wax, I call your ultimate love letter, because it's the nicest gift you can give your loved ones. Because if something happens to you, you want to make it as easy as possible for them so they can deal with the grief without also having to go through the worst stress they've ever been through, other than your death or disability.
Oh my God, I'm first in line for this book, by the way. It sounds, or
Yeah.
your workbook, it sounds
Yeah.
incredible. Because like you said, there's so many nuances that people forget so often to be part of. And same with my parents. Like I said, I kind of had a front row seat. Say my dad paid all the bills, he did all the money. The amount of time it took my mom, she basically took their bank statements and went through every transaction and was like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
there's a bill. Where'd
Yeah.
that come from? Who is that? Like, how do I
Yeah.
pay that? It was,
And you
it was
have to
nice.
do that.
And
And when I-
he was, I mean, we had trust, they had a revocable living trust, they had irrevocable trust, like, he really thought he had it all planned out, and it just goes to show.
Yeah, people don't think about, well, where do they find the information? What are your passwords? My God, I got 1,000 passwords. So how do they, I've got a password keeper on my phone, but how do they get into my phone? And what's the master password for
Your
my
face,
keeper?
just
Oh my gosh, so you
hold
got-
it up to your face.
yeah, you got to tell them how to get this information. Let's
Right.
say that somebody was in the military. Well, when did they go in the military? When were they discharged? What are their discharge papers? Are they, do they have any VA benefits? Somebody's got to know all that. Are they
Yeah.
on Social Security disability, or that, whatever it is? Somebody's got to know how to do that. Is there a safety deposit box? Where are all their bank accounts? Are there pay on death beneficiaries, or does it go through a will, or is it in a trust? I mean, the amount of information, I picture in my head, like the computer screens with all the data going like this, it's in my mind, that's what it is. Like in a situation like mine, whereas I got properties in 4 or 5 different states, and my husband would know nothing. He will run away. He tells me that he will run away.
I love it. Okay, so like I said, we could almost end there because we've kind of tied a nice bow on it, but I really want to go back to the self-directed IRA, especially because you're so involved in property investing. I really don't know anything about it. I feel like I should know more. So
Okay.
let's self-directed IRAs for dummies. What you got?
Yeah. So self-directed IRA for dummies. IRA stands for individual retirement account. We'll go back to the very, very beginning. And it was generated or created by Congress however long ago as a vehicle to encourage people to save for their retirement so that they weren't going to be wards of the government, so to speak, right? So originally when it started out, we just had what we now call the traditional IRA, meaning when you contributed money to that account, your IRA account, you got a tax deduction for that contribution. But when you started taking money out in your retirement years, you would pay income taxes on that money. Okay, so you're deferring the income taxes, but you're not eliminating them. Now we also have something called the Roth IRA. And if you have to meet certain income brackets to do it the traditional Roth way, that's confusing, to do the original Roth way. But that way is when you contribute money to a Roth IRA, you've already paid taxes on that income before you contribute it to the account. So you're putting in after-tax dollars. But no matter how big it grows, once it's in that IRA, you'll never pay income taxes on it again. So when you take the money out, it's completely income tax free. So rather than deferring income tax, you're eliminating income tax on any growth once you've put it in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly powerful tool for people particularly when they start young. If you already have a traditional IRA, usually you can convert that to a Roth IRA, but you'll have to pay taxes at the time of the conversion. So if you're, depending on your age, if you've been investing in a traditional IRA and you think you're going to go really grow that account, you might want to convert it and pay the taxes on it now. Let's say it's 50,000 and you have a line on a great deal that's going to make it $1 million. You pay the taxes at 50,000, you put and you can pay the taxes with other money, by the way. And you put the 50,000 in the Roth IRA and grow it to $1 million. Now, when you pull out $1 million, you're not going to pay income taxes on that $1 million. So it's a very, very powerful tool for creating tax-free wealth for people because it's compounding tax-free and you pull it out tax-free. Now, what's the downside of an IRA? Well, one, it's designed for your retirement. So once you put it in, you can't, with very limited exception, you can't get it out until you're 59 and a half. With a traditional IRA, you have to start taking it out when you're around 72. The laws are changing about the age depending on the year you die, but let's just call it 72. You got to start taking it out of a traditional IRA. You don't have to do that with a Roth. You never have to take it out. The other downside is that there are rules that you have to follow, and it's Internal Revenue Code section 4975. Just gonna write that down, look it up when you can't sleep at night, you'll go right to sleep. But anyway, that tells you who your IRA can invest with. There are disqualified parties, like your IRA can't loan money to your spouse or your children. And so there are some investments that you cannot do, some categories of investments you can't do, and some people your IRA cannot invest with, okay? But beyond that, it's a wide open field. And there's some other restrictions we don't have time to go into, but a lot of people use, like I use it for private lending. So let's say I had $100,000 in my IRA and I can loan that out to flippers making 10 or 12 or 15% a year. I'm just plowing all that money back in my IRA every year with no income taxes. So if I had $100,000 and I loaned it at 10% for a year and I made $10,000 in interest, if it's in my name, I'm paying income taxes on that 10,000. So it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? So I'm not keeping $10,000. Let's say I'm in a 30% tax bracket, I'm only keeping $7,000. But if my Roth IRA is loaning that $100,000 and it gets paid $10,000, it keeps the whole $10,000. There is no income tax. I just saved $3,000. Now let's say I did that 5 times a year. That's 15,000. 10 times a year, that's 30,000 I just saved in income taxes. I can turn that money over and over again. So people buy real property and their rent goes into the IRA, or there are all sorts of things. You buy a syndicated investment, you put 100,000 in, and I'm just using 100 for math. It can be any amount. It can be $100. You put 100,000 in and it grows to 300,000 that goes back in your IRA, no income taxes. Very.
Yeah, my mind is racing. So are these particular like accounts? Like, for example, my IRA is with Charles Schwab. Like,
yeah,
who's tracking the ins and outs? And like, do I just go cash out of Charles Schwab and then just make sure I put it back? And you know what I mean? Like,
no.
Are there certain companies?
You can do that, but you can do that. But if you want to invest yourself, like do lending or buy real estate investing or do syndications, which is like you're buying into a fund sort of thing to invest in apartment buildings or whatever. Normally what we do is we would take that account away from Schwab and roll it over. We don't actually get our hands on it. It goes straight from Schwab to a custodian who specializes in self-directed accounts. There's several of them. There are many of them, but Quest Trust Company, Forge Trust Company, Kingdom Trust. There's so many of them. Anyway, so these custodians that's all they do is they manage people's self-directed IRA or 401k accounts. So you take it from Schwab and they roll it over directly into a new account. Let's say at Quest Trust Company. They roll it over there. Now your account reads Quest Trust FBO for the benefit of Mary Hart IRA number 123, whatever it is. So now if I'm doing a loan, for instance, the promissory note says the lender is Quest Trust FBO Mary Hart IRA 123. So my IRA is the lender. So when that borrower pays the $10,000 interest in my example, it goes back into my IRA. So now my $100,000 IRA is worth $110,000. Now I'm going to loan $110,000 at 10%, and I'm going to make $11,000, and it comes back. Now I've got $121,000. I'm going to loan that out at 10, and I'm going to get $12,100 back. See what I mean? So I'm just growing it without income taxes.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so in this example, you had it in Mary Hart IRA. You gave $100,000 to Quest. Every time that, like, so you say you did it for a flipper. The flipper flipped it. They give you 110 back. Does that 110 have to return to your IRA, or can Quest keep managing? Like, do they have to put it back every time and take it back out?
Well, it's always in your IRA. So here's here's the practicality of it. Let's say you're a flipper and you want to borrow $100,000 from my IRA. We come to an agreement on the terms. I send Quest Trust a form. It's like a buy direction letter. And I basically say, fund this loan for this person, this property in $100,000. So Quest takes $100,000 out of my account, wires it to the closing attorney, right? Which then disperses it to the flipper. At the end of the deal, or every time a payment is made, that check is made out to Quest Trust FBO Mary Hart IRA 123. Now I can have that check mailed to me, so I can check a box that says, yep, I got the money. And then I just mail it directly to Quest Trust. They put it in my account. So my statement has all these different investments: loan 1, loan 2, loan 3, loan 4, syndication 1, syndication 2, whatever it is, house 1, house 2, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And is there, by law, is there a certain amount of time that it has to come back?
No,
Like
because
flipper,
it never
like
left it never left the name of my IRA. Yeah, it's a lot. But it works so well. It also, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It seems overwhelming when you start, but that's why you start and you learn. That's the whole purpose of my academy, by the way, is to teach these things. So once you do it, if I had said, Quest Trust, send me a distribution from my account, and it got in my name, I have only a certain amount of time to roll it over to a new IRA. But it technically never left the name of my IRA. The money went out, but it was still owned by my IRA. It's just instead of cash, now my IRA owned a promissory note. So it never left my IRA, it just changed the nature of the asset from cash to a promissory note. So there's no deadline. That loan could be 20 years long. Every month I'm getting interest payments right into my IRA. And when they pay me back, it goes right back into my IRA because the asset name never left my IRA. It was not a distribution. It just went from cash to a promissory note and then back to cash when it got paid off. Or let's say my IRA bought a house. My IRA has cash. It sends money to the closing attorney. Now my IRA has a house deeded to my IRA. The deed reads Quest Trust Company, FBO, Mary Hart, IRA 123. So it never left my IRA, just the nature of the asset changed. So there's no time limit. It can be out forever. I could die with that. And then my kids would inherit the IRA with whatever assets are in it. Cash, a promissory note, a house, a syndication, whatever it is.
Okay. And then but there's obviously also a risk, like, so in the scenario of the flipper, what if the flipper goes under or, the project
Sure.
doesn't, et cetera, like what happens then?
So that goes down to private lending criteria, whether you're lending in your own name or in your IRA. You always want to vet the property, the borrower, the deal, the paperwork. And so I only lend if I'm loaning no more than say 70% of the after repaired value of the house, and I have a first lien position against the house. So if the borrower fails to pay, I foreclose and take the house back, which is usually worth more, 30% more than what I've paid into it. So I only set these things up if I remain very protected. So I'm not going to loan more money on a house than I would be willing to pay for that house. Probably going to loan a lot less than I'd be willing to pay for that house. So if let's say I loaned $100,000, but the after repaired value was $130,000. And if I did it right, so the contractor couldn't walk away with materials or cash, and there are tricks for that. I loan $100,000. If they stop paying, I get back $130,000 house. I just made $30,000.
Gotcha.
Now, if everything goes well, maybe I've only made $10,000 in interest, but my money was protected because I had a first lien position against the house.
And so in that scenario, who is helping you set all that up? Like, would Quest do that, or are you responsible for filing the lien, all that type of stuff?
You're responsible for setting up the deal, but usually the way it works as a private lender is there's a closing attorney or title company involved that's preparing all the paperwork and recording all the documents. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm loaning I do a lot of loans to some friends and business partners of mine because they're flippers. I'm not. And so they'll say, hey, we need $100,000 loan. I have them send me all the information about the property, the comps, the tax records, photographs, scope of work, how much they're going to put into it, what the after repaired value is likely to be. And I'll go, okay, that's a safe loan for me. I'll make that loan. What happens next? They contact a closing attorney or a title company, depending on what state you're in. North Carolina would be a closing attorney. And we say, okay, this flipper is buying a house. I'm the bank, or my IRA is the bank. Here are the terms of the loan: 10%, 2 points, first lien position. There's a closing letter or an instruction letter I sent to the closing attorney. And so just like they treat any bank in a sales transaction, when the flipper buys the house, I'm the lender. So they will record, they'll have the borrower sign a promissory note. They'll record the deed of trust, putting me in a first lien position. I get other documents like an assignment of rents, documents that swear this is an investment property and not their personal residence, because there are more rules associated with that, things like that. So it's all structured. I never send money directly to the borrower. I'm only sending money through a closing attorney or a title company in their escrow account. So it only gets released to the borrower, the buyer, when all those documents have been signed and recorded, just like a regular sale. If I'm loaning the purchase price and the rehab funds, depending on how big of a job it is, I may say, okay, at the closing table, closing attorney can disperse the purchase price and draw number 1. And the borrower and I have done a scope of work ahead of time that says, okay, they need 3 draws, and this is the work that's going to be done in each draw. And I'll release draw 1 and hold the rest back until they can prove to me that they spent the funds correctly on draw number 1, and they're ready for draw number 2, and then ready for draw number 3. So I keep it back rather than just giving them all the money so they don't go spend it on another job. They got to prove they're using it for my job.
Yeah.
So I stay in a very protected position. I've been doing this since 2004, I've never lost a dime. I've
That's
done
pretty
tons
cool.
and tons. You know, if you recycle the number of loans have gone around and around and around, it's millions of dollars because I've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah. Hashtag goals.
Yeah, money goes out, money comes in, more money comes
Yeah.
out, money goes out, more money comes in.
There you go. Well, we're about at an hour, and like you said, we could continue talking for days, but I think this gives everyone a great nugget. And I'm so excited to hear about your academy. I think a lot of people will be drawn to that. Like I said, do you have like a mail subscription or email list where we can sign up so we know when your workbook is released?
Yes, so they can go, I don't know that they can sign up on the mailing list on this website, but I'm in the process of creating a new website. They'll be able to, but for now they could just email me at the website is alternativeinvestingmovement.com. I know it's long, alternativeinvestingmovement.com. There may be a sign up button there. Frankly, I haven't looked at it since I set it up. But they can also email me at maryhart@alternativeinvestingmovement.com. And then I'll just put them on our email list.
Cool.
So-
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it. And maybe we'll see you next time you're in town.
Yeah, well, I'm
I love
moving
that.
back in October, so I'll probably
With the
be seeing
seasons.
more of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the season, for 7 months. And I'll probably come to the AVL meetups and maybe we can all get together, whoever, we'll go have lunch or do something. That'd be fun. I love to teach this stuff. So if you ever want me to come to a group of real estate agents and teach, whether it's estate planning or Section 1031 exchanges, because I did that for a long time, or self-directed IRAs or private lending or any of that, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.